What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Hope you had a great weekend. Those of you who listen on audio, we did have a show yesterday. It was video only because there was a lot of whiteboarding going on, but Nick Echeverria, West End Zone from the forums, former coach, did a great job breaking down Guidry's blitz schemes, going over some of the basics and some of the nuances that Miami does. Strongly recommend you check it out if you did not hear it, but we are back fully audio and video here to talk about the biggest questions the Canes are facing. Portal's done. Spring practice is done. Recruiting is done for that class. So we know what we're dealing with the team. So what are the biggest questions that still remain? What are we looking for in the summer, in the fall, and of course, that first game? We will break it down in tremendous detail. First, I want to talk about our friends at Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. They will break down your case in tremendous detail. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733, and take back control of your life. And if you have a small business or any other company or product you want to advertise, reach out at CanesInsight@gmail.com. We are open for business, and we would love to pump your product to the Canes fans. We will guarantee your views. Again, CanesInsight@gmail.com if you're interested in advertising. Would love to hear from you. Let's get into it, Pete. We've got the top 5 questions facing the Miami Hurricanes now that we know what this team is going to look like. And, some of it is obvious. Some of it might be a little more in the weeds. But these, to me, are the critical questions that have not been answered by portal acquisitions or recruiting. So, Pete, where do you think this team stands here now that we're done with the portal?
Well, we're very excited about the additions in the portal. I think they filled a lot of needs, a lot of holes, and we're all expecting big things from this team, from this roster this year, D. But that goes without saying. There are still question marks, which we're going to get into today. I think a couple of them might be nitpicking, right? And they're more luxurious questions to have, so to speak. But a few of them, I think, could make or break the season as well. So we'll get into it here, starting with the left guard position, which this one I think is a little bit of a luxury question here, but a question nonetheless. So you see the improvement that Mario has made with that offensive line since he's been here. But still, Samson Okunlola, Matthew McCoy, 2 guys who really have played mostly tackle in their careers, and you're going to be asking them to play inside there at guard most likely.
Yeah, look, so you lose Javion Cohen to the NFL. He was undrafted for reasons probably more off the field, but a lot of people expect him to make Cleveland's 53-man roster for the Cleveland Browns. So big loss on the field and off the field. He's a big loss for the team. You also lose Matt Lee at center. Zach Carpenter steps in there, the transfer. You know what you're going to get there. I talked to a lot of people who are expecting the offensive line to take a step back. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. It was a very good offensive line last year, but I think everybody expects this group to be better, and certainly that's what you want to see as this program keeps getting revved up. Francis Mauigoa, right tackle, one of the best players on the team. You expect him to be an impact player, get better year 1 to year 2. And Nez Cooper, same thing. Expect him to get better at right guard year 2 to year 3. And Jalen Rivers, as experienced as he is, I was told he was one of the guys that made the biggest jump in spring, looking like a real high NFL draft pick, playing left tackle. Is he a guard in college or in the pros? Whatever. I'm told that he looked really, really good and really improved in spring, coming off a very good season where he was second team all ACC. So I think those are 3 impact players. Zach Carpenter, you know what you're going to get. Left guard, to me, is going to be the story because you got a lot of highly recruited guys competing for that spot. You mentioned Samson Okunlola. You mentioned Matt McCoy. We can get into those guys individually, but there's also more candidates to potentially fill that spot and make this the best offensive line in the ACC and a competitor for the Joe Moore Award, which year 3, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal. I don't think those standards are too high.
Well, and look, you're in a position here, if you're Miami, where you'd much rather have to move more of a tackle to guard as opposed to where they've been in the past, which is play guys who are probably better suited for the guard position and having them play tackle, because for the most part, those guys just don't have the athletic ability to, over the course of a game, over the course of a season, right, hang with some of these pass rushers that they're going to see on the edge there. I will say that I think the one adjustment, if it is one of these two, it's such a position of mentality. My guy Titus Howard for the Texans was drafted as a tackle and has played a ton of guard out of necessity for the team. He was a first round pick too, so it's not like he was drafted as a guy who, you know, was going to be a journeyman lineman, but he's had to play it. And the biggest thing he says, it's such a mentality position. As a tackle, sometimes you're up against some of these finesse pass rushers. You're dealing with speed a lot of times. In the interior there, you're getting hit from all angles, right? It can come from the left, it can come from the right. You're not just dealing with what's in front of you. So I think that is going to be the interesting adjustment to watch these guys make. I think talent-wise, they both have what it takes, right? And I think McCoy's been great to see his, you know, development early on here. But Sampson comes back strong from this injury, from what we know here in spring. And we had him on the show a couple weeks ago. If you haven't had a chance to watch that interview, his mentality, I think, has been really awesome.
And he talked about exactly what you said, the difference between playing tackle and playing guard. You know, guard, you're right there in front of the guy. It is more physical, more aggressive in nature. Tackle, you kind of have to play off the rusher. Is it going to be speed, power, inside, outside? There's more patience involved when you're playing tackle on the island. He said that was really his mentality shift. But there's multiple candidates for this left guard spot. If you look at the Rutgers game, the bowl game, you had Javion Cohen sitting out, getting ready for the Senior Bowl. You saw Luke Cristobal start. Matt McCoy also got some time. I don't see Luke Cristobal factoring into this position in terms of the starting spot or the rotation. So let's take him out of the equation. Maybe that's foolhardy considering he started in spring at left guard and he started the bowl game. But based on what I've seen and heard, I don't expect Luke Cristobal to be in that starter mix unless there's really a run of injuries. So let's start with the guys that started in spring to end spring, which was Samson Okunlola and Matt McCoy. I think those are the top two guys. What was interesting about spring was right tackle was open. Francis Mauigoa was injured. So you saw both of those guys at right tackle. You saw both of those guys at left guard. Obviously, Mauigoa is going to be a starter when he comes back, most likely a right tackle where he played last year, was a freshman All-America. So the question is, which one of those guys fits better at the guard spot? With McCoy, I think even though Sampson was a 5-star tackle and had all the accolades as a super tackle, now having seen him on campus, I actually think Matt McCoy is better suited for the outside. He's a former tight end who had a huge growth spurt. He's really big. You saw him last year playing tight end, as putting on the 81 and playing tight end. He got a lot of snaps. Of course, he is a tackle, not a tight end, but he's athletic enough to play there in spots like he did last year. And of course, that's his background. So I just think from a twitchiness movement standpoint, I actually like him better than Sampson, even though one's a 3-star, one's a 5-star. Where I see a big advantage with Sampson is his strength. This guy's a former wrestler, and it's not just his, it's not weight room strength necessarily, but the ability to torque guys and to really get in there and use his leverage. Typically, when you think wrestlers, you think guards or centers. Sampson, even though, again, we've always thought of him as a tackle, that wrestling background, I think, suits him better at guard. He's also very quick in terms of foot speed and getting to that second level, sealing off linebackers. Very smart, hardworking guy. So it's one of those things where, ironically, I think Matt McCoy's further ahead at tackle despite being the lower rated guy, and Sampson maybe further along at guard. With McCoy, you want to see more grit, more aggressiveness, more power, just more of that guard mentality if he's going to be playing inside there. So that battle to me is interesting just because of the different skill sets of the players involved.
And let's not discount the wild card here, D, which it's always Coach Cristobal and Miraball's mentality is get the best 5 out there. There's also a possibility if things play out a certain way that Jalen Rivers plays guard. We understand he's been awesome at tackle, and look, no matter what his projection is to the next level, if he's playing great there at left tackle here, there's no reason to move him. But if there is a real confidence in one of these other guys to play left tackle and he's just needed at guard, he could also be the one there.
And let me throw another curveball at you, because I actually think Francis Mauigoa is more likely to play guard than Jalen Rivers. And I have not seen Francis Mauigoa since the season. I saw Jalen Rivers in spring, quite a bit. If you ask me, Francis Mauigoa, based on what I saw in season, and Jalen Rivers, based on what I saw in spring, I would say Jalen Rivers is significantly ahead at tackle. He is the best offensive lineman on the team, either him or Cooper. And I think Rivers certainly is the best tackle on the team based on what I saw in spring. A lot of people think that Francis Mauigoa is an all-pro guard. You saw him in space on some of those pulls. He's super athletic and powerful, but more so explosive athleticism as opposed to, all the movement stuff. So does he move into guard? Another name to keep in mind, Markel Bell made a lot of progress in spring. His length is clearly suited for the tackle position. If you're talking about Markel Bell, even when he's not perfect, he extends his arms. He can drive guys wide just because of his pure length. It makes up for a lot of holes in his technique, his footwork, just inexperience. If he continues to make leaps, has a great summer, and he's the tackle, does Mauigoa move inside? Or what if McCoy is actually your best right tackle? Does Mauigoa move inside? There's a lot of options here. I think what I would say is, based on spring, I am higher on the athletic ability of McCoy than Sampson, and a little higher on Sampson's sort of wrestling, phone booth brawling ability than McCoy. So that'd be an interesting battle to watch.
Yeah, should be a fun one. But again, compared where the roster was, at least on offensive line, to when Mario first took over, and it's night and day. These are good problems to have. So moving along here, D, next question mark that we're talking about is the nickel spot. Mish Powell coming in from Washington, Damari Brown. Obviously, most people look at him as a bigger corner, but has the physicality and some of the versatility to play on the inside there. Blitz. Deani Hill coming in from Marshall as well. So there's options there, but I think this is a very, very important one because it goes to the bigger picture we've been talking about, the defensive back room, secondary. There's a lot of new faces there, a few guys gone, especially at that safety spot. But this is a very important one for this team next year.
I think if you look at the shopping list for Miami in the portal, they pretty much hit every need, and they hit it, at the high-end prices, the filet mignon side of the aisle when it came to their shopping list. Nickel corner is the exception. They would have loved to add a nickel corner. They did not. They added Deani Hill as an outside corner from Marshall, which helps their flexibility. I'm told he's running very well in early workouts, looks fast, looks the part in terms of that standpoint. So they have corners, and Mish Powell was primarily the starting safety, was primarily nickel during spring, but they don't have that guy that majors in nickel corner. Last year, Corey Couch was that guy. And basically, the first couple of years, you had Corey Couch, who he really majored in that nickel corner position. That was his role. They looked at Greedy Vance, who went to USC, looked at D'Angelo Pons, who really was an outside corner, but could have projected as a nickel. Ultimately, they do not fill that need. So the question becomes, does Mish Powell continue to play there like he did in spring? I don't think that is the preference. I think they would rather have him at safety. Safety is a thin position on the depth chart. Mish Powell just came out of a national championship game where he was a starting safety. I think you're more comfortable with him in that role. You do have Deani Hill, so you have more outside corners. If you're looking at the outside corner depth, Daryl Porter, one of the best in the ACC last year. Damari Brown, probably the most physically talented guy. Jadis Richard, another very talented guy who's really more of an outside guy, although he can play nickel. And then Deani Hill, who we mentioned, added from Marshall, a fit with Guidry and Chevis Jackson. Robert Stafford is the young guy that's probably pushing up in that range. So you got 4 or 5 corners. Who is going to be the nickel of that group if you keep Mish Powell at safety? And I think, to me, the guy that makes the most sense is Damari Brown. He's not your typical nickel profile as far as being a smaller guy. He is a big corner, but he brings a lot of physicality there. When he's that close to the ball, he can cause a lot of problems blitzing. He can hold up excellent against the run, and he's fast and athletic enough to cover smaller receivers. So to me, Damari Brown makes sense there. Is he going to want to do that? Does he view himself as an outside corner only? I think versatility only helps his NFL draft stock and his overall profile. But to me, that's the guy that I would keep an eye on at that nickel spot.
Well, and I think the question becomes too, do you see a team like Florida State last year who had Keon Coleman on the outside, they had Johnny Wilson on the outside, and it's going to be tough not to have Damari, if you face a team like that with bigger guys on the outside. And a lot of teams move those guys inside now. But I think that becomes the question, is when there is a necessity to play him on the outside because of how the matchups are, who plays inside there. So, and
look, you are bigger at corner than you were last year. Jadis Richard will play a bigger role at corner with his first full season. He's a big corner. And when I say full season, I mean he QC'd here in spring. He did the whole thing. Deani Hill is a longer corner. Daryl Porter's not huge, but he's not small. I'd say he's an average size corner. Definitely can play on the outside, did last year. So you have guys that can play on the outside. I don't think you have guys like a Jaden Davis or it's a Corey Couch who really fit better in the nickel, or Jaden Davis's case, he played some safety. I think you really are dealing with a lot of cornerbacks, and it's just who fits at that nickel role best, and you'll have enough size on the outside. So that's going to be a very interesting position to watch. Really, to me, the only position that was not checked off the grocery list.
All right, as we move along here, this has been a topic of discussion throughout the spring, and it's going to continue to be one as we move into fall camp. Backup quarterback, obviously Miami brings over Reese Poffenbarger from Albany, put up a ton of big numbers, was able to get the spring under his belt, which I think was huge in this whole thing. And then Emory Williams ends up coming back from his injury. We got to see him in game action last year in the orange and green, and we understand he brings a lot to the table from a moxie standpoint. The team, obviously, the guys around him believe in him, right? And he can come in and win games, right? That in a pinch, right? He showed it against Clemson, kept Miami in that ball game against Florida State. And we've seen him do it in the orange and green. But we understand that Poffenbarger is a guy who Shannon Dawson is very high on and showed some good things this spring.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic of discussion. I'm looking at the CanesInsight.com forums, 6.9 million posts and counting. If you haven't signed up for the free forums, the busiest community on the Canes world, in the Canes world. Troy Skiles has a post about Poff versus Emory, which is drawing a lot of love, about 110 replies. People are very passionate one side or the other. I would say the spring game was not the best performance for either player. I saw them look better at times during spring and spring scrimmages. If they were to play, obviously they would be playing. If they were to play as starters, they'd be playing with the starters. So you're talking about the great offensive line, the better receivers, Damian Martinez, Arroyo, et cetera, helping them, making them look better. So you judge them in that category because that's how they would look if they were the starting quarterback. I think, like you said, both of these guys have won games. Poffenbarger really carried his team at the FCS level to a playoff berth. Albany was based pretty much around his skill and his playmaking and his ability to get out the pocket, throw deep, and really make plays happen. Emory, as a true freshman that really shouldn't have been playing, was asked to manage the game and did so against Clemson, and FSU gave Miami a chance to win both games. Of course, they won the Clemson game, showed a lot of moxie, some limitations as far as how the game was called for Emory. He wasn't asked to do too much. So the question with him is, what can he do as he spreads his wings? Where's the ceiling on him? I think, to me, both guys with the first team offensive line and the first team skill position can manage you to wins, which is an improvement over where we've been in the past, where you're talking about young players that haven't really been played at all and being counted on to do something. These guys have played, started. There's a playbook there. There's film. These guys have done it. That gives you a little bit of a leg up in terms of backup quarterbacks. I personally thought that Reese Poffenbarger looked to me to be a more complete player in spring, simply because of the athleticism. Everything he does is quick. He's quick in terms of his twitch, moving around. He's quick twitch in his arm. He gets rid of it fast with a lot of velocity. His arm strength has translated from the smaller levels. So you look at some of the stuff he already did on film at Albany from an arm strength standpoint. You say, well, the arm's translated, so maybe he can do some of this stuff that he did at that level. I think accuracy-wise, Emory's probably a little more consistent. That's where Reese needs to do more. Of course, size-wise, he's going to be dealing with bigger guys. He's not a big guy to begin with, at least in terms of height. So it'll be an interesting battle into fall. Emory was injured for the start of spring, although he pretty much practiced the whole way through, had a left wrist injury, his non-throwing hand. So will be very interesting to see how that battle plays out. Miami, I think, is in better shape than most teams as far as having experienced backups, but if Cam Ward goes down in a season as important as this one, you want to be sure that whoever goes in there can beat the mid-tier ACC teams and give you a chance to win your high competition games.
Yeah, and you got to like where both of these guys are coming from mentally. If their number was called upon, everything that we hear about Poffenbarger is that obviously he's eager to show that he belongs at this level coming from Albany, right? So whenever he does get an opportunity, if that opportunity does come because of injury, you would think he is ready for it. The same thing with Emery. He's already shown that last year, when his number was called upon. So it's an interesting situation there for sure, but it's going to be a nice battle to see develop behind Cam Ward there.
And let me be quick. I just want to go over the stats here so folks can have some context to what we're saying. Pulled up the Clemson game for Emery. 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Great completion percentage, 24 of 33. Of course, there were a lot of short passes. The game plan was really meant to not put him in positions to get sacked. I think the question with Emery is going to be his ability to elude the rush. He has a good offensive line in front of him if he does play with the first team, but that is the question, which is why he threw so many short passes against Clemson. Against FSU, it was a little different. He was 8 of 23, 35%. Not very good completion percentage, but he did hit some big plays. Had a beautiful fade to Jacoby George and another deep pass to Jacoby George, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. Actually had a higher passer rating in the FSU game, despite the 35% completion percentage, because he did make the bigger plays. And with Poffenbarger, you're looking at division, FBS stats, but 62%, or his first year, 59% his second year, 3,600 yards his second year, 36 touchdowns, 13 picks. Again, was asked to do a lot more than Emery. He really had to carry the team. So we'll be interested to see how each of those guys fares with the first team offensive line. But just off the eye test, my concern with Emery is just the quick twitch, the athleticism. It looks very well schooled and fundamental, but it just doesn't look that quick and easy when things get a little messy and murky. Whereas Poffenbarger can kind of just flick it and get out of trouble, or make a quick step to the right or left, run for his first down if he needs to. I think just the quick twitch athleticism, you saw him throwing down some dunks. I think that might give Poffenbarger the edge, but it's a long summer. That's going to be a very interesting battle in camp.
All right, next one here. Topic is homegrown defensive tackle. And look, I think this is an interesting one for a couple of reasons. Obviously excited about these guys they brought in. People, I think, are forgetting a little bit about CJ Clark coming over from NC State because he was one of the early window guys. Simeon Barrow from Michigan State. Marley Cook, a little bit on the smaller side, but I think he can give you a different gear there at times from the inside. But these guys, some of these names we put up on screen: Josh Horton, Ahmad Moten, Justice Scott, Artavius Jones coming in as freshmen. But I think the difference with these guys is their frame. They bring you that, bigger presence at the position, right? Some of these other guys we mentioned, Barrow, very disruptive, but he's not a 315, 320 pound space eater, right? And I think that's what you could potentially get with these guys right here.
Yeah, and I think the reason I put homegrown defensive tackle is, instead of, let's say, 4th defensive tackles, number one, you don't know if someone emerges, you don't know if they're necessarily going to be the 4th defensive tackle. They could beat guys out. Right now, you have CJ Clark, who you mentioned, I think is being underrated from NC State. Marley Cook, smaller kind of firecracker player, former wrestler, fire hydrant, 705-pound squat from Middle Tennessee. And then Simeon Barrow, the prize defensive tackle in the portal. You beat out LSU for him from Michigan State. A guy who's 250 coming out of high school, has grown into a nice athletic 3 technique, but not, your 300-pounder. So to me, what I look at with the talk about the homegrown defensive tackle is a war daddy who you could see developing into an NFL player just from a body type standpoint, athleticism standpoint. The reason being is it's hard to get those guys out of the portal. Teams like Georgia, they sign those guys and develop them, Clemson. So you're really going to get those guys in recruiting. Miami, the first couple of years, defensive tackle was a struggle. It was a home run last year, as we all know. So who's going to be that guy, that homegrown guy, to help this team this year and possibly push the 3 transfer portal guys for their spots on top of filling that 4th spot? There's a rotation. These guys are going to play a lot. It's not just, the 4th guy in the depth chart. This is a guy who's going to play a huge role. I think you have to start with Ahmad Moten, brother of Anthony Moten. He's someone Miami signed out of Cardinal Gibbons, beat out Oklahoma, was a late riser, great senior year, somebody with a lot of size, a lot of athleticism. His upside is outstanding, and he's someone that was specifically mentioned to me as someone who they're counting on to get consistent. It's his 3rd year in the program and really push for one of those spots. His talent is as good as any defensive tackle that we've been talking about, but he needs to do it consistently. But he's one, entering his third year, again, signed from Oklahoma. We beat out Oklahoma, beat out Venables for Ahmad Moten in that transition class of Mario. Can he put it together and be that homegrown defensive tackle? It's an age position, and of all the guys we're going to talk about, he is the oldest one on that list.
And really, too, D, it's funny because when we were recording in this exact room, it wasn't the studio just yet. I remember you mentioning Moten last spring as a guy who was showing flashes, right? So it's obviously there, but at that position, you see so many times guys who flash. And if you aren't finishing plays, if you aren't bringing it on each and every play, bringing that motor consistently, then it's all for nothing, right? So I think he could be a guy who, again, may not start as a top 3 D tackle in this rotation to start the year, but unfortunately injuries happen there, and he could bring a different gear there.
Yeah, look, 325 pounds, 6'3". The size is there with Moten, which is what you like. Another guy who was basically the lone defensive tackle of note that we signed last year, Josh Horton, guy from North Carolina, had a really, really, really nice senior year of high school. He's listed at 6'4", 295 out of Atlanta area. I think he's way bigger than that, having seen him. When anyone who's seen Horton in person knows this guy's a big, big defensive tackle, late growth spurt guy, very athletic for his size. I'd say he's in the 310 range. Really looks the way you want it to look. But he's had nagging injuries. Nothing catastrophic, but nagging injuries. He missed spring. People expect him to make a run for this spot, but it's based strictly on the athleticism, the size, the talent, not on production so far. Can he stay healthy and make a run? I think body type wise, he is what you look for at that position. And really, if you talk about body types, you really are talking about the 3 guys Miami signed this year. Really, they signed 4. Dalen Russell, probably more of a developmental guy, although he's intriguing. I think in terms of the high rank guys, you're talking about Justin Scott, top 10 player nationally. Those guys tend to play early. He didn't miss spring because he hadn't graduated yet, but 6'5", 310. Played basketball, so he leaned up a little bit. Can he gain the weight to really make a difference? Again, this is Justin Scott from the Chicago area, the 5-star. I saw him in person in spring. Seemed like a great kid, great size, but was on the skinnier side just because you could tell he'd been playing basketball and burning a lot of carbs. How quick will the weight come back on for football? You wish he was here in spring, but guys that are top 10 players nationally tend to play. Clemson had 2 very, very good defensive tackles that played last year. Defensive ends / defensive tackles, I should say. TJ Parker was in that 255 range, and Peter Woods is in that 270 range. Those guys played a major role for Clemson. Before that, it was Miles Murphy and Brian Breezy. So when you sign these highly rated guys, they can play early in the ACC. Justin Scott, I think, could fall in that category. We'll have to see what he looks like when he gets here. Armando Blunt, who just turned 17. He's going to be 17 the entire season, which is crazy. He's another 5-star, reclassified, super smart. You've seen the videos of him working out. Missed spring because of a shoulder injury, but 270-plus range. Maybe he's an end. Maybe he plays a little bit of tackle, kind of a situational guy. He has the tools. He has the IQ and the maturity. Is he going to be healthy and physically ready enough? Again, 17 years old, defensive tackle in the ACC. Tough ask. Also, Artavius Jones from the Panhandle, 4-star Miami signed, state weightlifting champion, looks big. He stood next to Leonard Taylor last year, and he was bigger than Leonard Taylor. So I think from a physical standpoint, he's probably the most far along of these freshman defensive tackles. Again, did not participate in spring. Can he come in and make an impact? Those are the names that you're really watching to say, can we get one of these homegrown non-transfer guys to make an impact on this team?
All right, last category here. We'll call it game day management, and everyone's going to, think we're just talking about the game against Georgia Tech last year with the kneeling situation, but it's much deeper than that. Obviously, Cam Ward has had his, well-publicized turnover. I don't want to call it a problem, but it's something he definitely needs to cut back on this season for Miami. The penalties that obviously we can point back to multiple Jacoby George moments, James Williams late hit moments. You have the numbers. One of the most penalized teams in the country last year.
And by the way, before we talk bad news, I'll tell you the good news, which is Canes Ware's got a ton of gear for sale. Panthers, he Marlins, Dolphins, and of course, your Miami Hurricanes. To see all this gear from Caneswear, caneswear.com or the store in Davie. Check them out. They are rolling. And again, Panthers, they're in a dogfight here in the Eastern Conference Finals. Nobody's got more Panthers gear than Caneswear and caneswear.com. But switching back to what you teed up, Pete, as far as game day management, I agree. There's a lot to it. The kneeling against Georgia Tech, you got to start there. I mean, it is what it is. Everything's been said about it, but it was a really bad situation nationally. So you can't run from how bad that was. It was horrible. And it was, something that you always had heard about this staff and seen flashes of it. For it to kind of peak with something like that is obviously critical. That was the turning point of the season last year. That kind of thing cannot happen again. That's an obvious thing. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but certainly that has to be a priority of the staff from a process standpoint, from just asking the hard questions internally standpoint. That cannot happen again. Here's my thing with this, though, is Oregon was not a joke of a program in terms of winning and losing games. They were a real team. They obviously accumulated talent like Miami's accumulating now, but they won. They won 73% of their games, 35-13 when Mario was there. That is a very, very high winning percentage at the Power 5, Power 4 level. So, yes, they accumulated talent, but they also turned that talent into games. There's coaching involved there. There's decision-making and management involved to win that many games at that high a clip. That is an elite clip. In Oregon, they're winning that way now, and they won that way under Chip Kelly, but they weren't winning that way when Mario first arrived there. So I think when we talk about Mario, the coach, separate from Mario, the talent accumulator, don't forget that they were a winning team at Oregon. I think sometimes we lose sight of just how good those teams were consistently and winning the games they were supposed to win. Now, the other side of that is 12-13 here in Miami. So obviously certain things need to change. Penalty yards per game, Pete, you mentioned it, 106th last year, and it was 103rd in 22. So a consistent number in terms of national ranking, that needs to change. Now, there are some highly penalized teams that win. Some of Bama's teams have been highly penalized. But when you're in the bottom consistently, that's not just bad luck. That is something that needs to be addressed and corrected. And then you mentioned turnovers. Miami's turnover margin was abysmal last year, one of the worst teams in the country as far as giving the ball away. That was mostly on the TVD interception side of things, which, again, interception's a team stat, but there were more on the interception side. With Cam Ward, he's one of the worst fumblers in the country, or at least he was at Washington State. I don't think his hands are going to get that much bigger or stronger, but there are things he can do to protect the ball, and obviously you can protect him both with your play calling and your offensive line. So Miami needs to improve in this category, which goes beyond just the game day coaching, which is a big thing, but also the penalties, the play calling as far as when to speed up, when to slow down, and the ability to limit turnovers. I think all of those things were poor for Miami last year, which is why when you look at some of the advanced metrics, you say Miami had a very good defense last year, according to some SP Plus and other defensive metrics. Not excellent, but good. Good offense last year. Good special teams. Not a very good record. Why? It's this category right here, the game management, the turnovers, the penalties. How much can Miami improve in this area? I think that is a question that we won't know until the games start. The other ones we might get a better idea through camp and some of the competition. But this area right here is so obvious that I know it is being addressed internally, and we have to just wait and see how the outcome of some of those changes looks.
Yeah, and again, a lot of questions were answered throughout the transfer portal season, but still have to see how these guys perform once they are in the orange and green, right? So new environments for a lot of them, different situation, but we're excited, but there's still questions. We still got some answers that need to be seen here in the coming months, but we're excited to see it all unfold. Remember to sign up for CanesInsight.com, completely free, the most active Canes community in the world. I was going to say in the country, it's in the world, right? We're worldwide. And we'll be live tomorrow as we are every week. So start getting your questions in now on social media. Send it to us on Twitter, on the website, and we'll be live so you can get your questions in there as well. Stay tuned for the time. We'll be dropping that sometime tomorrow morning.
Yep. Like and subscribe. We're here every day. Go Canes.